So, hello friends. Now we'll be discussing the previous year's question of GS Paper 1 UPSC 2019. Now, during the course of analysis of previous year's questions, I have found that in GS 1, the questions that are asked from geography section are of three types. One, the questions that are asked are factual, fact based. सेकेंड और फैक्ट बेस्ड क्वेश्चन में बेसिकली यू हैव टू राइट इन पॉइंट्स. ज़रूरत नहीं है इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन स्पेशली देने की. और फैक्चुअल क्वेश्चंस डिपेंड अपॉन द नॉलेज ऑफ द फैक्ट दैट इज बीइंग आस्क्ड. अभी डिस्कस करूंगा. पहले दो क्वेश्चंस वो फैक्चुअल हैं. देन सेकेंड टाइप ऑफ क्वेश्चंस आर एनालिटिकल दैट रिक्वायर एनालिसिस. थर्ड क्वेश्चन जो डिस्कस करूंगा दैट इज एनालिटिकल. आई tell you beforehand. And the third type of questions are concept based, conceptual. You need to have conceptual clarity, only then you can write quality answer. So today I am going to discuss all three types of questions that have been asked in 2019, and you will see how to answer them. Factual question, तुम्हारी fact based knowledge. Analytical question, how in depth understanding of the issue you are having. And third, conceptual questions, quality of your answer depend on how much clarity of the concept you are having, right? So we are starting with year 2019. The first question is, assess the impact of global warming on the coral life system. What impact global warming is having over coral life systems. Now first you need to understand what is this coral life system. Basically coral life system कह दो या coral reefs कह दो, what actually it is, या coral colonies कह दो. Basically there's an organism known as coral polyps. There's a microorganism, coral polyp. It secretes limestone and dolomite. These secretions form coral reef. इनसे जो फीचर बनता है ट्रॉपिकल सीज में, दैट इज नोन एज कोरल रीफ और कोरल कॉलोनीज. They are secreted by coral polyps. So far, so long this coral polyp is alive, the secretions continue and coral reefs continue to enlarge, and they are characterized by maximum marine biodiversity. Coral colonies or the topography made up of limestone and dolomite, which is known as coral reef or coral colonies, are characterized by maximum number of marine species. Although coral reefs or coral colonies made up of limestone and dolomite, they account for just 0.1% of the oceanic surface, but they are responsible for, they account for 25% of total marine species. Therefore, they are known as metropolis of the ocean. Ocean में जहाँ भी coral reefs मिलेंगी, they are made up of limestone and topography. They are characterized by maximum biodiversity. More than 3000 species of fishes. मतलब पूरे ओशियन में. therefore they are known as metropolis. जैसे मेट्रो सिटीज नहीं होती हैं शहरों में, देशों में, मेट्रो सिटीज में dense population is there. Likewise, coral colonies or coral reefs are characterized by a large number of marine species. But these coral reefs are very fragile ecosystem. Fragile in the sense they get disturbed very easily. These coral polyps can survive only within a very narrow range of environmental condition. A slight increase in temperature by 3-4 degrees for heightened duration lead to their bleaching and death. If temperature goes down by 1 or 2 degrees for some duration, then also these coral polyps die. मतलब विदिन 20 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड आइडियल टेम्परेचर है. इससे थोड़ा ज़्यादा बढ़ गया ड्यूरिंग समर हीट वेव्स, द टेम्परेचर ऑफ द ओशन राइजेस एंड दैट lead to bleaching. If the temperature goes down slightly by 1 or 2 degree, they undergo bleaching, they die. And if sea surface rises slightly and beyond the range of sunlight is unable to penetrate, coral polyps die. If they are exposed above the sea during low tide, again they undergo bleaching and they die. Slight change in the salinity, they die. They cannot tolerate higher salinity or low salinity. Salinity should be within the range of 28 to 40. तो fresh water influx आ गया, they die. They cannot tolerate sediment, they die. They cannot tolerate मतलब तो हो क्या रहा है, global warming से all these phenomena are changing. The melting of ice is taking place, that is causing change in salinity. Sea level is rising because of thermal expansion, that is leading to rising in sea level. Temperature of sea is increasing, that is also leading to coral bleaching, death of coral. So coral reefs are known as lungs of the ocean, basically rainforest of the ocean, because they are not only characterized by maximum biodiversity, but they are also important for marine ecosystem. कोरल पॉलिप्स, ये जो ऑर्गेनिज्म होते हैं पॉलिप्स, हैव अ सिम्बायोटिक रिलेशनशिप विद एन एल्गी. दिस एल्गी accounts for bulk of the energy requirement of these coral polyps. This algae lives in the tissues of coral polyps, and this algae is responsible for the coloration of coral polyps. एक algae होती है zoanthy algae that with this coral polyps have symbiotic relationship. This algae by way of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide plus sunlight, it produces food for the coral polyps plus oxygen. As a result, since this algae utilizes carbon dioxide, which happens to be very much detrimental to ocean, क्योंकि जैसे जैसे global warming हो रही है, surplus carbon dioxide is being released in the atmosphere, 90% of it is absorbed by the ocean. That leads to acidification of ocean, that leads to lowering of pH of the ocean, and that adversely impacts the entire marine ecosystem. जो एसिडिफिकेशन ओशन का होता है दैट इज वेरी मच डिट्रीमेंटल. इससे कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड जो ओशन में डिसॉल्व होती है दैट आल्सो रेजेस द टेम्परेचर ऑफ द ओशन. कोरल पॉलिप्स बाय वे ऑफ सिम्बायोटिक रिलेशनशिप विद एल्गी utilize this dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean, thereby reducing the temperature of the ocean, and that is they can help play a role in containing the global warming. And secondly, they also help in reducing the acidification of the ocean. That is very dangerous. So coral polyps are integral part of marine ecosystem, and as global warming is adversely impacting their survival, this is making marine ecosystem even more vulnerable. Now rise in global warming, जैसे टेम्परेचर बढ़ता है बिकॉज ऑफ राइज इन ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज, 90% of these gases are absorbed by ocean. That leads to rising of temperature of the ocean. And as these coral polyps cannot withstand sustained increase in temperature, this rise in temperature of the ocean leads to coral bleaching. Coral bleaching में क्या होता है? The algae, this algae which is in symbiotic relationship with the this organism, this polyps, this algae is expelled. Once this algae is expelled, the main source of food or energy to the polyp is eliminated. Secondly, this algae is responsible for the coloration of coral polyps. जो limestone और dolomite ये secrete करते हैं, basically this algae is responsible for the coloration. Once algae is expelled, the coral appear white in color. That is known as coral bleaching. अच्छा, अभी coral polyps have expelled algae, so the primary source of energy food has been lost. Although coral polyps के पास ये capability होती है, they can directly capture tiny planktons and fishes, but that does not fulfill their food requirement, so they are unable to survive for long without algae. अगर टेम्परेचर बढ़ा रहता है, if heightened temperature is maintained and this algae remains expelled, if temperature remains elevated, the prolonged absence of algae lead to death of coral polyps. Coral bleaching से coral polyps नहीं मरते. Once coral bleaching simply means this because of raised high temperature of the ocean, this algae has been expelled from the by the polyp. So the main source of food supply is cut off, but they still survive anyhow. They still survive. But if this high temperature is extended for long duration and these polyps remain without algae, that is main source of energy, then ultimately these coral polyps after bleaching, after some time, if high temperature is maintained and algae remains out of them, they are unable to survive and they die. If temperature remains elevated, the prolonged absence of algae lead to the death of the coral polyps. Now, in 2021-22, there was large-scale coral bleaching in Great Barrier Reef. Great Barrier Reef is the most massive coral reef. Matlab, it extends for 2,000 kilometers on the eastern side of Australia. This experienced massive bleaching events because of global warming, rise in sea surface temperature in 2021 and 22. Now resulting in significant damage to coral ecosystem. जब coral ecosystem adversely impact होगा तो huge variety of marine life which is dependent on it, that is also lost. Marine life that is dependent on them also gets lost. That leads to loss of biodiversity. वैसे ही एक और एरिया है कोरल ट्राइंगल. कोरल ट्राइंगल इज एन एरिया दैट लाइज अराउंड इंडोनेशिया, फिलीपींस एंड पापुआ न्यू गिनिया. इट इज बिलीव टू बी वन ऑफ द रिचेस्ट कोरल इकोसिस्टम, बहुत रिच है. एंड दिस ऑल्सो रजिस्टर्ड सिग्निफिकेंट ब्लीचिंग एंड बायोडाइवर्सिटी लॉस ड्यू टू ग्लोबल वार्मिंग. नाउ एक तो यह है कि टेम्परेचर राइज किया ओशन का बिकॉज ऑफ ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, जिसकी वजह से एल्गी को एक्सपेल कर दिया, जिसकी वजह से कोरल bleaching takes place, coral appear white, and this sustained temperature is not allowing the symbiotic relationship with algae. So ultimately, after bleaching, after some time, corals if die, coral polyps die. Once they die, there is no secretion of limestone and dolomite, and these colonies began to shrink. दूसरा वजह क्या है कोरल ब्लीचिंग का? बिकॉज ऑफ increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, bulk 90% of it is absorbed by the ocean, so oceanic water becomes acidic, carbonic acid, and once pH of the water decreases, the quantity of carbonate ions in the oceanic water decreases, and these coral polyps, their skeletons are basically made up of calcium carbonate. और जब पानी में कार्बोनेट आयंस कम होंगे, so the skeletons will become weak, rate of growth of coral polyps will slow down, and this will adversely impact on the growth of coral colonies. So once oceanic water becomes acidic, the carbonate ions dissolved in the ocean they decrease, which are crucial for corals to build and maintain their skeletons. Their skeletons are made up of this limestone and dolomite, calcium carbonate. एसिडिफिकेशन होने की वजह से जो रेट, जब पानी में कार्बोनेट आयंस ही नहीं है तो वो किस चीज़ का अपना स्केलेटन बनाएंगे? इनका स्केलेटन तो कैल्शियम कार्बोनेट से बनता है ना. दिस इंक्रीज इन एसिडिफिकेशन ऑफ ओशन लीड्स टू स्लोअर ग्रोथ ऑफ कोरल, स्लो सिक्रीशन ऑफ लाइमस्टोन एंड डोलोमाइट, slows down coral growth, weakens the coral skeleton, and make it more difficult for coral reefs to recover from other stress related to bleaching and physical damage. उनका skeleton ही weak हो जाएगा. Amount of limestone and dolomite secreted is less. They are weak. Then they are more prone, more susceptible to physical damage. आराम से skeleton टूट जाएगा in case of cyclone, and their capability to deal with bleaching is also reduced. According to IPCC, since the beginning of Industrial Revolution, ocean's acidic content has increased by 26%. That is, oceanic water has registered an increase in acidity by 26% since beginning of Industrial Revolution. एसिडिफिकेशन होने से देखा गया है कि पैसिफिक ओशन में, बिकॉज ऑफ इंक्रीज एसिडिफिकेशन इन पैसिफिक ओशन, द कोरल कॉलोनीज अराउंड हवाई are experiencing adverse impact of acidification because this is leading to slower growth of coral colonies and reduced reef building capacity. जब पानी में कार्बोनेट आयन कम हो जाएगा बिकॉज ऑफ इंक्रीज एसिडिटी, तो द रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ ऑफ कोरल एंड द रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ ऑफ कोरल कॉलोनीज विल slow down. Coral colonies means coral reefs. And since coral reefs happen to be the home of 25% of the total marine species, जब they are home to 25% of total marine species of ocean, जब coral colonies and coral reefs will get destroyed, which happens to be the habitat for 25% of marine species, those marine species will also they are not expected to survive. Once the habitat is destroyed, those marine species are also lost, leading to immense loss of biodiversity. The decline of coral colonies due to warming leads to habitat loss for a wide range of marine organisms, ultimately reducing biodiversity, marine biodiversity. अब जैसे जैसे ये कम होगा, रेट ऑफ वार्मिंग बढ़ने लगेगा, क्योंकि कोरल पॉलिप्स absorb the carbon dioxide from the ocean, They play a role in containing global warming, and they also reduce the acidification. But these two factors are the global warming of the ocean, and acidification is increasing at a rate at which the coral polyps are unable to handle it. They are unable to catch up with them. The loss of coral colonies affect the entire marine food web. एक बार वहां पर रहने वाली मछलियां खत्म हो गई तो ओशन में, समुद्र में रहने वाली कार्निवोर फिशेस विच आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन देम, दे आल्सो डिक्लाइन. तो एंटायर फूड वेब एंड ऑल द फूड चेन्स गेट एडवर्सली इंपैक्टेड, क्योंकि कोरल रीफ्स रीजन ही ऐसा है जहां पर सबसे ज्यादा बायोडाइवर्सिटी है. एंड इफ दैट बायोडाइवर्सिटी इज लॉस्ट, अदर मेरीन स्पीशीज विच आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन दोज population which are surviving coral colonies, those will also get lost. According to IPCC, ये कहते हैं कि sea level is rising and the 75% contribution for sea level rise goes to this thermal expansion of oceanic water because of warming. जो sea water warm हो रहा है ना, तो it expands because it absorbs 90% of the greenhouse gases, and after absorption it gets heat up and thermal expansion of ocean takes place. That contributes 90% of the sea level rise. That is because of global warming, sea level is expected to rise by from 30 centimeter to 120 centimeter by 21st century. This is huge. Coral islands are very low lying. हमारे लक्षद्वीप हुए, मालदीव्स हुए, and in West Pacific Ocean, majority of the islands are coral. These coral islands are very low lying. Even the rise of sea level by 30 to 120 centimeter will lead to loss of several coral countries like Maldives. वो तो बहुत ही वर्ज ऑफ खतरे पे, दे आर लो लाइंग आइलैंड्स. सी लेवल राइज, दे विल गेट सबमर्ज्ड. द हाईएस्ट पॉइंट ऑफ लक्षद्वीप इज 5 meters high, but rest of the island is just few centimeters above the sea. And Maldives is at the verge of extinction because Maldives इतना low lying country है, and the pace at which sea level is rising, all the islands of Maldives will get submerged. So this was about coral reef. Now, so global warming is leading to extinction of reef. That is leading to extinction of reef.